Rachel's hands were shaking as she stared at her phone. No. This couldn't be happening. She'd just sent the most embarrassing text of her life to the absolute worst person possible. The message was supposed to go to her best friend Katie. It was a desperate, late-night confession about how she was 2 months behind on rent and didn't know how she'd buy groceries this week. How the electricity bill was overdue and she was terrified they'd shut it off. How being a single mom to 4-year-old twins was crushing her, no matter how hard she worked. But her exhausted brain had scrolled to the wrong contact, and now that deeply personal message was sitting in the phone of Daniel Wright, her ex-boyfriend, the father of her children, the man she hadn't spoken to in 3 years. Oh, and he was a billionaire. Not that she'd known that when they were together. Rachel wanted to throw her phone across the room. She wanted to cry. She wanted to delete the message, but it was too late. The 2 little check marks showed he'd already read it. She sank onto her worn couch and put her head in her hands. This was a nightmare. After everything she'd done to keep her pride intact, to prove she could do this alone, she'd just sent him a message that basically screamed, "I'm failing." 3 years ago, she'd walked away from Daniel when she discovered the truth. They'd met at a community center where he volunteered, teaching kids how to code. He wore regular clothes, drove a normal car, and never once mentioned that he was the founder of a tech company worth billions. For 6 months, she thought he was just a sweet guy who worked in IT. Then she got pregnant with twins, and when she told him, everything came crashing down. His family showed up at her apartment, lawyers in tow, talking about prenuptial agreements and paternity tests and non-disclosure agreements. That's when she learned that her boyfriend wasn't just Daniel, the nerdy programmer who made her laugh. He was Daniel Wright, tech mogul, who'd been hiding his entire identity from her. She felt like such an idiot. Like he'd been playing some kind of game, pretending to be normal while secretly being rich. The betrayal cut deep. So she told him and his fancy lawyers to leave. She didn't want his money. She didn't want anything from him. She'd raise her babies on her own terms, and she had. Sort of. Barely. Rachel worked as a nurse at County General, pulling double shifts whenever she could. The twins, Mia and Luke, went to a daycare that took most of her paycheck. She clipped coupons, bought clothes at thrift stores, and hadn't had a haircut in 8 months. But her kids were fed, clothed, and loved. That was what mattered, except now she'd screwed up. She'd let her guard down for one moment, and in her exhaustion, she'd revealed everything to the one person she'd sworn would never see her struggle. Her phone buzzed. Rachel's stomach dropped. A message from Daniel. "I'm sorry you're going through this." That was it. Short, simple. She didn't know what she expected, but somehow that made it worse. She tossed her phone onto the couch cushion and went to check on the twins. They were sleeping peacefully in their shared bedroom, Mia clutching her stuffed bunny and Luke sprawled out like a starfish. They looked so innocent, so perfect. They deserved better than this cramped apartment with the leaky faucet and the heater that only worked half the time. Rachel kissed both their foreheads and whispered, "Mommy's got you. I promise." She just wished she felt as confident as she sounded. The next morning started like any other. Rachel got the twins fed, dressed, and out the door to daycare before her shift started. She was running on 4 hours of sleep and gas station coffee, but that was pretty normal these days. When she got home that evening, exhausted and ready to collapse, there was a package waiting outside her apartment door, a fancy envelope, the kind made of thick cream-colored paper that probably cost more than her grocery budget. Rachel's heart started pounding. She knew exactly who it was from. She got the twins inside, turned on their favorite cartoon, and sat at the kitchen table. Her hands were shaking again as she opened the envelope. Inside was a check. Rachel's eyes went wide as she counted the zeros. $500,000. $500,000. She'd never seen that much money in her entire life. There was also a note handwritten in Daniel's familiar scrawl. For Mia and Luke. No strings attached. They deserve stability even if you hate me. They deserve to have everything they need. Please don't let your pride hurt them. This is for them, not for you. I know you can take care of them, but you shouldn't have to choose between keeping the lights on and feeding them. Let me do this one thing. I owe them that much. I owe you that much. Rachel read the note 3 times. Then she stared at the check until the numbers blurred. This was everything. This was the answer to every prayer she'd whispered at 3 in the morning when she couldn't sleep because she was worried about money. This was stability. This was breathing room. This was being able to give her kids the life they deserved. But it was also charity. It was admitting defeat. It was letting Daniel swoop in and save the day after she'd spent 3 years proving she didn't need saving. "Mommy, I'm hungry," Mia called from the living room. Rachel looked at the check, then at her daughter. The choice should have been obvious. But pride is a funny thing. It makes you do stupid things even when you know better. She got up and made dinner, mac and cheese from a box because that's what she could afford. The twins ate happily, completely unaware that their mother was holding a piece of paper that could change everything. That night, after the kids were asleep, Rachel did something she hadn't done in 3 years. She looked up Daniel online. It wasn't hard to find him. His face was everywhere. Magazine covers, news articles, tech conference panels. He looked older, more serious. But those were still the same eyes that used to look at her like she was the most important person in the world. She found an article about his company's latest charitable initiative. Millions of dollars to fund after-school programs for underprivileged kids. The article quoted him saying something about how every child deserves opportunities regardless of their circumstances. Rachel closed her laptop. Her pride was telling her to rip up the check, to send it back with a note telling Daniel she didn't need his pity. But her love for her children was louder than her pride. She thought about Mia, who needed glasses but Rachel kept putting off because she couldn't afford them. She thought about Luke, who asked why they never went anywhere fun like his daycare friends. She thought about the field trip permission slip she'd had to decline because she couldn't afford the $15 fee. Rachel picked up the check and stared at it one more time. Tomorrow she'd make a decision. Tonight she'd let herself imagine what it would be like to not be drowning. To breathe. To give her kids the childhood they deserved. But first she had to figure out what this money really meant. Because nothing is ever truly free. Especially when it comes from a billionaire ex-boyfriend you haven't spoken to in 3 years. And she had a sinking feeling that cashing this check would open a door she'd worked very hard to keep closed. Rachel stared at the check for 3 days before she finally made a decision. She couldn't cash it, not yet, not without understanding what it really meant. So she did something she swore she'd never do. She decided to confront Daniel. Getting his office address was easy. The man was the CEO of a major tech company. His building was downtown, all glass and steel, the kind of place that made regular people feel small. Rachel had to take 2 buses to get there because she didn't trust her car to make the trip. She walked into that fancy lobby wearing her nurse's scrubs because she'd come straight from her shift. The security guard looked at her like she'd walked in from another planet. Maybe she had. This world of marble floors and designer furniture felt a million miles away from her reality. "I need to see Daniel Wright," she told the receptionist, trying to sound confident. The woman, perfectly dressed with perfect makeup, gave her a polite smile. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but I'm the mother of his children." "I think that counts for something." The receptionist's professional mask slipped for just a second. Then she picked up the phone. Rachel couldn't hear the conversation, but within minutes someone came down to escort her upstairs. The elevator ride felt like it took forever. Rachel's heart was pounding. She hadn't seen Daniel face to face in 3 years. What was she supposed to say? How was she supposed to act? His office was on the top floor, of course. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the entire city. Rachel stepped inside and there he was, standing behind a massive desk, looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Rachel," he said softly, "you came." "We need to talk," she managed to say, her voice steadier than she felt. Daniel nodded and gestured to a sitting area by the windows. He looked nervous, which was strange. This was his territory, his empire. But somehow he seemed just as uncomfortable as she was. "I can't accept your money," Rachel started, even though that's not what her heart wanted to say. Not like this. Not without understanding what's really going on. Daniel leaned forward, his hands clasped together. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you disappeared from our lives. You signed away your rights when I asked you to. You haven't tried to contact us in 3 years. And then suddenly, I send you one accidental text and you're sending me $500,000? That doesn't make sense, Daniel. People don't do that." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood up and walked to the window, his back to her. "I never stopped caring," he said finally. "I know you think I did. I know you think I just walked away. But I didn't, I couldn't." Rachel felt something twist in her chest. "What are you talking about?" "Your landlord," Daniel said. "Mr. Peterson, nice guy. We've had several conversations over the years. Rachel's blood ran cold. What? Last year when you were 2 months behind on rent. You remember how suddenly he said he'd give you more time? How he told you not to worry about it? That was me. I paid it. She couldn't breathe. You did what? And the daycare. Remember that scholarship that magically appeared last winter when you couldn't afford the fees? That was me too. Rachel stood up, anger flooding through her. You've been spying on us? Not spying, Daniel said quickly, turning to face her. Making sure you were okay. There's a difference. There's really not. Rachel's voice was rising now. You've been watching us? Sneaking around behind my back? Paying my bills without telling me? Because you wouldn't have accepted help if you'd known it was from me. Daniel shot back. You made that very clear 3 years ago. You wanted nothing from me, so I did the only thing I could. I made sure you and the kids were safe from a distance. You had no right, Rachel said, but her voice was shaking now. She didn't know if she was angry or hurt or some complicated mix of both. They're my children too, Daniel said quietly. I signed those papers because you asked me to. Because I thought that's what you needed. But that didn't stop me from being their father in my heart. It didn't stop me from caring what happened to them. To you. Rachel sank back into the chair. This was too much. Everything she thought she knew was crumbling. Why didn't you tell me? She whispered. Why hide it? Daniel sat down across from her. Because you needed to feel independent. You needed to prove you could do it on your own. I understood that. But I also couldn't just stand by and watch you struggle when I could help. So I found a middle ground. A stupid middle ground, apparently. How long? Rachel asked. How long have you been watching us? Since the day you told me to leave, he admitted. I hired someone. Not to spy, just to make sure you were safe. To let me know if you needed anything. I know how that sounds, but I couldn't just walk away completely. I couldn't. Rachel put her head in her hands. Part of her wanted to scream at him. Part of her wanted to cry. And a tiny, traitorous part of her was touched that he'd cared enough to stay connected even from a distance. Why did you hide who you were? She asked suddenly. When we first met. Why lie about being rich? Daniel was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was different. Vulnerable. Do you know what it's like to never know if people like you for you? He said. I grew up with nothing, Rachel. Nothing. I built my company from my college dorm room. And when it took off, everything changed. Suddenly, I had friends I'd never met. Women who wanted to date me who'd never looked at me twice before. Everyone wanted something. He met her eyes. And then I met you at that community center. You were volunteering too. Teaching kids to read. You smiled at me and it was real. You didn't know who I was. You didn't care about money or status. You just liked me. Plain boring me. Do you know how rare that is? Rachel felt tears stinging her eyes. She'd never thought about it from his perspective before. I know I should have told you, Daniel continued. I know that. But I was scared. Terrified that if you knew the truth, everything would change. You'd see me differently. And I was right, wasn't I? The moment you found out, you left. That's not fair, Rachel said. I left because you lied. Because I felt like an idiot. Your family showed up with lawyers talking about how I was probably a gold digger trying to trap you. They treated me like I was nothing. I know, Daniel said, pain clear in his voice. I fired those lawyers the same day. I told my family to back off or they'd never see me again. But by then, you'd already decided I wasn't worth trusting. They sat in silence, 3 years of hurt and misunderstanding hanging between them. The check, Rachel said finally. Why now? Why so much? Because of your text, Daniel said simply. Because I realized you'd never ask for help no matter how bad things got. You'd rather suffer than come to me. And I couldn't live with that anymore. I couldn't keep watching from the shadows while you struggled. So I broke our unspoken agreement. I made myself visible. You can't just throw money at problems, Rachel said, but it sounded weak even to her. I know, Daniel said, but it's what I have to give. And Mia and Luke deserve better than worrying about whether the lights will stay on. They deserve stability, opportunities, everything. Hearing him say their names hit differently. He knew their names. Of course he did. He'd probably known everything about them for years. Have you seen them? Rachel asked. In person, I mean. Not just reports or photos. Daniel shook his head. No, that felt like crossing a line. I wanted to, God, I wanted to. But you made it clear you didn't want me in their lives, so I respected that, even though it killed me. Rachel thought about Mia and Luke. About how Luke asked about his daddy sometimes and she'd tell him that his daddy lived far away. About how Mia drew pictures of families at school and always left one figure out of hers. They ask about you, she admitted. Not all the time, but sometimes. Luke especially. He sees other kids with their dads and wonders why he doesn't have one. She watched Daniel's face crumble at those words. He looked away quickly, but not before she saw his eyes get glassy. I want to meet them, he said, his voice rough. If you'll let me. Not as a stranger. As their father. I know I have no right to ask. I know I gave up that right when I signed those papers. But I'm asking anyway, please let me know my children. Rachel closed her eyes. This was the question she'd been dreading. Because once she said yes, there was no going back. Their carefully constructed life would change forever. But maybe it was time. Maybe her kids deserved to know their father. Maybe she'd been holding onto her hurt for too long. Okay, she whispered. But we do this slowly, on my terms. And if you hurt them, if you disappoint them, I will never forgive you. Daniel nodded, and the hope in his eyes was almost painful to see. Thank you. I promise I won't let them down. Are you? Rachel stood up. She needed to leave before she started crying or said something she'd regret. I'll cash the check, she said. For them. Not for me. And we'll set up a time for you to meet them. But Daniel, no more secrets. No more watching from the shadows. If we're doing this, we do it honestly. All of it, he agreed. No more secrets. As Rachel left his office and rode the elevator down, she wondered what she'd just agreed to. She'd spent 3 years building walls, and in one conversation, they'd started to crack. She just hoped she wouldn't regret it. Rachel cashed the check the next day. Walking out of the bank with confirmation that $500,000 was now in her account felt surreal. She kept expecting someone to tell her it was a mistake, that money like that didn't happen to people like her. But it was real. And for the first time in 3 years, she could breathe. The first thing she did was pay off every bill. Rent, utilities, credit cards she'd been barely making minimum payments on. She cried in her car after she made the last payment. Actually cried. The weight that had been crushing her chest for so long suddenly lifted, and she could finally take a full breath. Then came the harder part. Telling Mia and Luke about their father. She'd practiced the conversation 100 times in her head. But when she finally sat them down one evening after dinner, all her prepared words disappeared. You know how you guys sometimes ask about your daddy? She started. Mia and Luke looked up at her with those big, curious eyes. Luke nodded eagerly. Mia, always the more cautious one, stayed quiet. Well, your daddy wants to meet you, Rachel continued. He lives in the city, and he's been wanting to see you for a long time. Would that be okay? Is he nice? Mia asked quietly. Rachel's heart squeezed. Yes, baby. He's very nice. And he's very excited to meet you both. Does he know about dinosaurs? Luke asked seriously. Because I really like dinosaurs. Rachel laughed through the tears that were threatening to fall. I'll make sure he knows that. They set up the first meeting at a park. Neutral territory. Somewhere the kids felt comfortable and could run around if things got awkward. Rachel was a nervous wreck all morning. She changed her outfit 3 times and still felt underdressed. Daniel was already there when they arrived. He was sitting on a bench wearing jeans and a simple shirt, trying to look normal, approachable. When he saw them, he stood up and Rachel saw his hands were shaking. Mommy, is that him? Luke whispered loudly. Yes, baby. That's your daddy. They walked over slowly. Mia held Rachel's hand tight. Luke was trying to act brave, but he stayed close too. Hi, Daniel said, and his voice cracked a little. He cleared his throat. Hi, I'm your dad. You can call me Dad or Daniel or whatever feels right. I'm just really happy to meet you. Luke stared at him. Mia hid partially behind Rachel's leg. Daniel knelt down to their level, which Rachel appreciated. He wasn't trying to loom over them or rush things. I know this is weird, he said gently. I know I'm basically a stranger, but I want to get to know you. Both of you. If that's okay. I like dinosaurs, Luke announced suddenly. Daniel's face broke into a genuine smile. Yeah? What's your favorite? T-Rex, but also Triceratops. They're cool because they have horns. Those are excellent choices, Daniel said seriously. Did you know that Triceratops could weigh as much as 2 elephants? Luke's eyes went wide. Really? And just like that, they were talking. Luke chattering away about every dinosaur fact he knew. while Daniel listened like it was the most important conversation in the world. Mia was still quiet, watching everything carefully. Rachel knew her daughter. She was the thinker, the one who needed time to process. After a while, Daniel pulled out a bag Rachel hadn't noticed before. "I brought something for you guys," he said. "I hope it's okay." He pulled out 2 boxes. One had a toy dinosaur set. Luke gasped and immediately started opening it. The other box was different. It was an art set with markers, colored pencils, and a sketchbook. "Your mom told me you like to draw," Daniel said to Mia softly. Mia's eyes lit up. She looked at Rachel, who nodded. Slowly, Mia reached out and took the box. "Thank you," she whispered. "You're welcome," Daniel said. "Maybe you could draw me something sometime?" "I'd really like that." Mia nodded, still shy, but Rachel could see her daughter was warming up. They spent 2 hours at that park. Daniel pushed them on the swings. He helped Luke build a dinosaur battle scene in the sandbox. He sat quietly with Mia while she drew pictures, asking her about each one, and Rachel watched it all from the bench, her emotions all over the place. She'd expected to feel angry or resentful. Instead, she felt something she hadn't expected. Relief. Relief that her kids were getting something she couldn't give them. A father who clearly loved them. When it was time to leave, Luke hugged Daniel. Just walked right up and hugged him. Daniel looked like he might cry. He hugged Luke back carefully like he was holding something precious that might break. "Can we see you again?" Luke asked. "If your mom says it's okay, I'd really like that," Daniel said, looking at Rachel. "We'll work something out," Rachel said. Mia, still quiet, gave Daniel a small wave. He waved back with a smile that reached his eyes. In the car on the way home, Luke talked nonstop about everything they'd done. Mia was quiet until they were almost home. Then she said softly, "He's nice, Mommy. I like him." Rachel had to pull over because tears were blurring her vision. Happy tears, sad tears, confused tears. All of them at once. The visits became regular. Every Saturday, Daniel would come by. Sometimes they'd go to the park. Sometimes the zoo or a museum. He learned their routines, their likes and dislikes. He learned that Luke didn't like loud noises, and Mia needed time to warm up to new situations. Rachel watched him become a father. It wasn't instant. It was gradual, awkward sometimes, like the time he tried to help Mia with her hair and ended up with a tangled mess, or when he gave Luke too much sugar and the kid bounced off the walls for 3 hours. But he showed up. Every single Saturday, no matter what. And slowly, surely, the kids stopped seeing him as the nice man who visited and started seeing him as dad. One rainy Saturday, when outdoor plans were canceled, Daniel asked if he could come to their apartment instead. Rachel hesitated. That was their space, their safe place. But the kids were disappointed about missing their dad time, so she agreed. He showed up with groceries and a plan to make cookies. Rachel watched from the kitchen doorway as he helped the twins measure ingredients. Flour ended up everywhere. Luke cracked an egg on the floor. Mia got chocolate chips in her hair. It was chaos. It was perfect. "You're getting the hang of this," Rachel said, helping clean up while the cookies baked. "I have good teachers," Daniel replied, watching Mia and Luke argue over whose turn it was to lick the spoon. There was a comfortable silence. Then Daniel said quietly, "Thank you for giving me this chance. I know it wasn't easy." "They deserve to know you," Rachel said. "I was wrong to keep you away for so long. I was hurt and angry, and I let that affect them." "That wasn't fair." "You were protecting them," Daniel said. "That's what good parents do. And you're an amazing mom, Rachel. They're incredible kids because of you." The sincerity in his voice made her chest tight. She'd spent so long thinking of Daniel as the enemy, the liar, the one who broke her trust. She'd forgotten that before all that, he was someone who made her laugh, someone who was kind, someone she'd loved. "Mommy, can Dad stay for dinner?" Luke asked as the timer went off for the cookies. Rachel and Daniel both froze. It was the first time Luke had called him Dad. Not Daniel, Dad. Daniel's eyes were definitely misty now. He looked at Rachel with such hope, such vulnerability. "Yeah," Rachel said softly. "Dad can stay for dinner." That night, after Daniel left and the kids were asleep, Rachel lay in bed thinking about how much had changed. A few months ago, she was drowning, alone, convinced she could handle everything herself. Now there was someone else to share the load. Someone who showed up, who cared, who loved their kids as much as she did. She thought about the money sitting in her account. She'd used some of it to move them into a better apartment in a safer neighborhood. The one they'd move into next month had 2 bedrooms, an actual kitchen and heat that worked properly. She'd reduced her work hours, which meant more time with the kids. She'd even enrolled in classes to get her nursing degree advanced. But more than the money, more than the security, what surprised her was this. She didn't hate Daniel anymore. Somewhere between the park visits and the cookie disasters and watching him learn to braid Mia's hair from YouTube videos, she'd forgiven him. Maybe not completely, maybe not enough to forget the hurt, but enough to see him as a person who made mistakes just like her. Enough to see that he was trying, really trying. The next Saturday something shifted. Daniel showed up as usual, but Mia ran to him and hugged him without hesitation. She showed him her latest drawing, chattering about her week at school. Luke demanded they play superheroes, and Daniel spent an hour being dramatically defeated by a 4-year-old. And Rachel realized something that scared her. This felt like family. Not the family she'd imagined 3 years ago, but something new. Something they were building together, piece by piece. Later, while the kids played, Daniel helped Rachel fold laundry. Domestic. Normal. He held up one of Luke's tiny shirts with a soft smile. "They're getting so big," he said. "Yeah," Rachel agreed. "I can't believe they'll be 5 soon. Can I be there?" Daniel asked suddenly. "For their birthday?" "I know that's a big ask, but I'd really like to be part of it." Rachel thought about their previous birthdays. Small celebrations with just her and whatever friends she could afford to feed cake. The kids deserved more. They deserved both their parents celebrating them. "We should plan something together," she said. "A real party. Invite their daycare friends." The smile that spread across Daniel's face was worth everything. "Really? Really? But you're in charge of the cake." "I can't bake to save my life." They laughed together and it felt natural. Easy. Like maybe they could do this co-parenting thing. Like maybe eventually they could even be friends. As Daniel left that evening, Mia hugged him tight. "Love you, Daddy," she said sleepily. Daniel froze. Then he lifted her up and held her close. "I love you too, sweetheart. So much." Rachel watched from the doorway and she knew, whatever happened next, whatever complicated feelings she still had to work through, one thing was certain. Her kids had their father back. And maybe that was enough for now. Everything was going well. Too well, maybe. That should have been Rachel's first warning. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning, official, legal, with Daniel's lawyer's name and the return address. Rachel's hands went numb as she opened it. Petition for joint legal custody. The words blurred together as she tried to read. There were pages and pages of legal language, but the meaning was clear. Daniel wanted official legal recognition as the twins' father. Shared custody. Parental rights. Rachel felt like she'd been punched in the chest. She couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. All she could feel was betrayal crashing over her like a wave. This was it. This was the real reason for everything. The money. The visits. The cookies and the park days and learning to braid Mia's hair. It was all leading to this. He was taking her children. She called Katie her best friend because she didn't know what else to do. "He's trying to take them," Rachel said, her voice shaking. All that stuff about wanting to know them, about being sorry. It was fake. He was building a case. And I fell for it. "Slow down," Katie said. "What exactly does the paper say?" Rachel read it out loud, stumbling over the legal terms. Katie was quiet for a minute. "Rach, this isn't full custody," she said carefully. "It's joint custody. He's not trying to take them away. He's trying to be legally recognized as their father." "It's the same thing," Rachel shouted. "I trusted him. I let him into their lives. And now he's using lawyers against me just like his family did 3 years ago." She hung up before Katie could respond. She needed to think, to plan. To protect her children from whatever game Daniel was playing, the anger built all day. By the time Daniel was supposed to come by for his Saturday visit, Rachel was ready to explode. When he knocked on the door, she yanked it open before the kids could get there. "Not today," she said coldly. "You need to leave." Daniel looked confused. "What, why?" "I brought stuff for the park." "You know exactly why," Rachel said, keeping her voice low so the kids wouldn't hear. "Did you really think I wouldn't find out? That I'd just go along with it?" "Find out about what?" Daniel asked, but something in his face shifted. "Guilt. The custody papers. Get out." Rachel said. Stay away from us. Stay away from my children. Rachel, please let me explain. Explain what? How you used my kids to build a custody case? How everything was fake? How you played us all? Daddy? Mia's small voice came from behind Rachel. She was standing in the hallway, Luke next to her. Both kids looked scared and confused. It's okay, babies, Rachel said, trying to sound calm. Go back to your room for a minute, okay? But it's Saturday, Luke said. We're supposed to see Daddy. Not today, Rachel said firmly. Why not? Luke's bottom lip started trembling. Did we do something bad? Daniel looked at the kids, then at Rachel. Can we please talk about this? Away from them? There's nothing to talk about, Rachel said. You made your move. Now deal with the consequences. Stay away from us or I'll get my own lawyer. She closed the door in his face. Then she leaned against it and tried not to fall apart while her children stared at her with tears in their eyes. Why can't we see Daddy? Mia asked quietly. Because grown-ups have complicated problems sometimes, Rachel said. Come on, let's watch a movie. But the kids didn't want a movie. Luke cried himself to sleep that night. Mia drew pictures of their family, but in every single one she scribbled out Daniel's figure in black marker until it was just a dark blob. Rachel's heart broke watching them, but she couldn't back down. She wouldn't. Not when Daniel was trying to take them away. She hired a lawyer. A good one, even though it ate into the money Daniel had given her. The irony wasn't lost on her that she was using his money to fight him. Her lawyer, an older woman named Patricia, reviewed the custody papers carefully. This is pretty standard, Patricia said. He's asking for joint legal custody, which means shared decision-making about education, healthcare, things like that. The proposed visitation schedule is actually very reasonable. Every other weekend and one evening a week? I don't care if it's reasonable, Rachel said. He signed away his rights. He can't just change his mind. Actually, he can, Patricia said gently, especially if he can prove he's been involved in the children's lives and that legal custody would be in their best interest. Has he? Rachel thought about the last few months. The visits. The birthday party they'd been planning. The way the kids lit up when they saw him. Yes, she admitted quietly. Then he has a case, Patricia said. Rachel, I can fight this if you want me to. But I have to ask, is this really about what's best for your children or is it about your feelings toward their father? The question hit hard. Rachel wanted to say it was about the kids. But was it? Or was she really just terrified of losing control? Of having to share them? Of being hurt again? That night, Katie came over after the kids were asleep. You're being stupid, Katie said bluntly. She'd never been one to sugarcoat things. Excuse me? You heard me. You're letting your pride and your fear mess up something good. Those kids love Daniel. He loves them. And you're punishing everyone because you're scared. He lied to me, Rachel said. Again, he went behind my back. Did he, though? Katie asked. Or did he do exactly what you would have done if the situation was reversed? Think about it, Rach. You're not married. You're not together. He has no legal rights to his own children. What happens if something happens to you? He'd have no say. The kids could end up with your parents or in foster care. He'd have to fight just to see them. Rachel hadn't thought about it that way. He should have told me he was doing this, she said weakly. Yeah, probably. Katie agreed. But you also would have lost your mind if he'd asked permission first, be honest. Would you have said yes if he'd come to you and asked for joint custody? The answer was no. Rachel knew it was no. I thought so, Katie said. Look, I'm not saying you have to be happy about it. But that man has shown up for those kids every single week. He learned to cook. He watches princess movies and plays dinosaurs and sits through dance recitals. He's trying, Rach, really trying. Don't punish him for wanting to be a real father. After Katie left, Rachel sat alone in the dark. Her phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. Please let me explain. I'm not trying to take them from you. I just want to be their father legally. What happens if there's an emergency and I can't make medical decisions? What if something happens to you? I need to be able to protect them. That's all this is. I swear, another text came. I should have talked to you first. You're right. I'm sorry. But please don't keep me from them. They need both of us. Rachel stared at the messages for a long time. Then she looked at the custody papers again. Really read them this time. Patricia was right. They were reasonable. Fair, even. Daniel wasn't asking for primary custody. He wasn't trying to take them away. He just wanted to be officially recognized as their father, and maybe deep down that's what scared her most. Because if he was their legal father, she couldn't just shut him out anymore. She'd have to share them. Share decisions. Share responsibility. Share everything. But wasn't that what co-parenting was supposed to be? The next morning, Rachel called Daniel. He answered on the first ring. "We need to talk," she said. Really talk. Without lawyers, they met at a coffee shop. Neutral territory. Like that first meeting at the park. Both of them looked exhausted. "I'm sorry," Daniel said before Rachel could even sit down. "I should have told you I was filing the papers. I should have talked to you first. I was scared you'd say no." "I would have," Rachel admitted. "That's the problem. I would have said no because I'm terrified of losing them. Of losing control. I'm not trying to take them from you," Daniel said earnestly. "Rachel, you're an amazing mother. They need you. I would never try to change that." "Then why the custody papers? Why now?" Daniel looked down at his coffee. "Because I realized something. Right now I'm basically a babysitter with no rights. If something happened to you, I'd have no say in what happens to them. Your parents could take them across the country and I'd have no legal standing to stop it. If they get sick or hurt, I can't make medical decisions. I can't even register them for school programs without your permission." He looked up at her. "I'm their father. I want to be their father in every way that matters. And that means having legal rights and responsibilities. Not because I don't trust you, but because they deserve to have both parents able to protect them." Rachel felt tears threatening. "I'm scared," she admitted. "I'm scared that if we do this, everything will change. That you'll try to control things or make decisions I don't agree with. That we'll end up in court fighting all the time." "We won't," Daniel said firmly, "because we'll talk. We'll compromise. We'll figure it out together. That's what parents do, right?" "I've been doing it alone for so long," Rachel said. "I don't know how to share this." "Then we'll learn," Daniel said. "Together. I'm not perfect, Rachel. I'm going to mess up. Probably a lot. But I promise you everything I do is because I love those kids. They're my world." They talked for 2 hours. About fears and expectations and boundaries. About how to make decisions together. About what joint custody would actually look like day to day. And slowly, Rachel's anger faded into something else. "Understanding, maybe. Or acceptance. I'll agree to mediation," she said finally. "Not a court battle. We'll work through this with a mediator and figure out an agreement that works for everyone." The relief on Daniel's face was palpable. "Thank you. Thank you so much. But I have conditions," Rachel continued. "We make major decisions together. You don't override me on things. We communicate about everything. And if this doesn't work, if you use your legal rights to hurt me or the kids, I will fight you with everything I have." "Deal," Daniel said immediately. "All I want is to be their dad. That's it." They started mediation the next week. It was hard. There were arguments about schedules and holidays and where the kids would go to school. But they worked through it. With the mediator's help, they created a parenting plan that felt fair to both of them. The twins noticed the tension, though they didn't understand it. Luke kept asking when they could see Daddy again. Mia drew pictures of them all together, then ripped them up. After their third mediation session, Rachel realized something. The kids were suffering because of the adults' problems. That wasn't fair. "I think we should tell them what's happening," she said to Daniel, in kid terms. "But they deserve to know that we're working things out." So they sat Mia and Luke down together, both parents, and explained in simple words that they were making some grown-up decisions to make sure Daddy could always be in their lives. "Are you and Daddy fighting?" Mia asked quietly. "We're working through some things," Rachel said honestly, "but we both love you very much. That never changes." "Does this mean Daddy's staying?" Luke asked hopefully. Daniel looked at Rachel. She nodded. "Yeah, buddy," Daniel said, pulling Luke into a hug. "Daddy's staying. Forever." And watching Daniel hold their son while Mia climbed into Rachel's lap, something in Rachel's chest finally loosened. This wasn't the enemy. This was her children's father. Maybe it was time to stop fighting and start building something better. For them, for all of them. 6 months later, Rachel barely recognized her life. In the best way possible. The custody agreement was finalized. Joint legal custody, shared decision-making, and a schedule that actually worked. Daniel had the twins every other weekend and Wednesday evenings. Holidays were split fairly, and somehow miraculously it was working more than working. It was good. Rachel had gone back to school part-time. She was taking classes to become a nurse practitioner, something she'd dreamed about for years but never thought was possible. Daniel adjusted his work schedule to cover childcare during her classes. They'd created a shared calendar app where they tracked everything from doctor appointments to school events. The twins were thriving. Luke had started kindergarten and was obsessed with learning to read. Mia had joined a kids' art class and talked nonstop about painting and clay. They moved between Mom's house and Dad's place without complaint, treating both as home. And Rachel and Daniel had become something unexpected. Friends. Real friends. It happened gradually. The defensive walls came down bit by bit. The angry texts became normal conversations. The tension faded into comfort. They started grabbing coffee after drop-offs, talking about the kids but also about other things. Life, work, movies they'd seen. Rachel learned that Daniel volunteered at a coding camp for underprivileged kids every summer. Daniel learned that Rachel had been writing poetry in her spare moments, something she'd never shared with anyone. They learned each other all over again, without the lies and secrets that had poisoned things before. But something else was happening too. Something Rachel tried very hard to ignore. She was starting to feel things for Daniel again. Not the surface-level attraction from before. Something deeper. Something that scared her. It was little things. The way he remembered her coffee order. How he'd text her random things the kids did that he thought she'd want to know. The way he looked at her sometimes when he thought she wasn't paying attention. Katie noticed, of course. Katie noticed everything. "You're falling for him again," Katie said one night over wine after the kids were asleep. "I am not," Rachel protested. "Please, you light up when he texts. You dress nicer on drop-off days. And I saw you staring at him during Luke's school play last week." Rachel groaned. "Is it that obvious?" "To everyone but him, apparently," Katie said. "So what are you going to do about it?" "Nothing," Rachel said firmly. "We're in a good place. The kids are happy. I'm not going to mess that up by making things complicated." "Maybe it wouldn't be complicated," Katie suggested. Maybe it would be exactly right, but Rachel couldn't risk it. She'd worked too hard to build this co-parenting relationship. If she told Daniel how she felt and he didn't feel the same way, everything would become awkward. The kids would suffer. No, it was better to keep her feelings locked away. The twins' 5th birthday party changed everything. They'd planned it together, Rachel and Daniel. A big celebration at a local park with all their little friends from school and daycare. There was a bounce house, face painting, and a massive dinosaur-themed cake that Daniel had special ordered. Watching the twins run around with their friends, surrounded by love and joy, Rachel felt overwhelmed. This was everything she'd wanted for them. A real childhood. Happiness, 2 parents who showed up. She was standing by the present table when Daniel walked over. "We did good," he said, watching Mia show off her face paint to her friends. "Yeah," Rachel agreed. "We really did. Can I tell you something?" Daniel asked, and there was something in his voice that made Rachel's heart skip. "Sure. I'm happy," he said simply. "For the first time in years, I'm really, genuinely happy. And it's because of them, and you. This whole thing we've built. I wouldn't trade it for anything." Rachel felt tears prick her eyes. "Me too," she admitted. "Even though you drive me crazy sometimes with your color-coded schedule and your perfectly organized everything." Daniel laughed. "And you drive me crazy with your last-minute changes and your refusal to plan anything more than 2 days in advance." They smiled at each other, and the moment stretched. Rachel felt it again, that pull. That want. "Mommy! Daddy, come see." Luke was shouting, pulling them both toward the bounce house. The moment passed. Maybe for the best. That night, after all the guests had left and the twins were crashed out in a sugar coma, Daniel helped Rachel clean up. They worked in comfortable silence, throwing away paper plates and boxing up leftover cake. "Thank you," Rachel said as they finished, "for all of this. For being here. For being an amazing dad. Thank you for letting me," Daniel said. "I know it wasn't easy. Trusting me again." "You earned it," Rachel said. "Every day you show up and you earn it." They stood in her kitchen and the air felt charged somehow. "Different." "Rachel," Daniel started, then stopped. "Never mind. What?" She pressed. He shook his head. "It's nothing. I should go." It's late, but he didn't move. Neither did Rachel. "Do you ever think about us?" Rachel asked quietly. Not the US with the kids, just us. What we were before everything got complicated. Daniel's eyes widened slightly. All the time, he admitted. Do you? Yeah, Rachel whispered. More than I should. The silence that followed was heavy with things unsaid. Finally, Daniel spoke. I never stopped loving you, he said, the words tumbling out like he'd been holding them in forever. Even when you hated me. Even when I thought I'd never get the chance to be in your life again. I never stopped. And these past few months, getting to know you again, seeing you as a mother, as a person working so hard for our kids, I've fallen in love with you all over again. Rachel couldn't breathe. Daniel, I'm not telling you this to pressure you, he said quickly. I know we're in a good place. I know we've built something important for the kids. I needed you to know. I needed to be honest. Rachel thought about all her reasons for keeping quiet, all her fears, and then she thought about life. About second chances. About the fact that they'd already been through the worst and come out the other side. I love you too, she said, and watched his face transform. I've been trying not to. I've been telling myself it would ruin everything. But I do. I love who you are now. I love the father you've become. I love how we are together. Really? Daniel looked like he was afraid to believe it. Really, Rachel confirmed. But I'm scared. I'm terrified of messing this up. The kids. We won't, Daniel said, stepping closer. Because we're not the same people we were 3 years ago. We've grown. We've learned. We know how to communicate now. We know how to work through problems together. He reached out and took her hand. I'm not asking you to marry me or move in together tomorrow. I just want a chance. A real chance to do this right. To date you properly. To build something with honesty this time. Rachel looked at their joined hands, then at Daniel's face, open and hopeful and so sincere. She thought about the man he'd been and the man he'd become. She thought about their children sleeping upstairs, happy and loved. She thought about all the reasons to say no, and then she thought about all the reasons to say yes. Okay, she said. Let's try. But slowly. And we put the kids first, always. Always, Daniel agreed. He pulled her into a hug and Rachel let herself lean into him. It felt like coming home. They started dating. Actual dating. Daniel took her to dinner when the kids were with her parents. They went to movies. They talked for hours about everything and nothing. And it was different than before. Better. Because they knew each other now. Really knew each other. The good, the bad, and the complicated. The kids noticed, of course. Kids always notice. Are you and Daddy boyfriend and girlfriend? Mia asked one day out of nowhere. Rachel almost choked on her coffee. Why do you ask? Because Daddy holds your hand now, Mia said matter-of-factly. And you smile at each other funny. Would that bother you? Rachel asked carefully. If Daddy and I were together? Mia thought about it seriously. Would you live together? Maybe someday, Rachel said honestly. But not right now. Right now we're just spending time together and seeing how things go. Okay, Mia said, then went back to her coloring like she hadn't just asked the most loaded question ever. Luke was more direct. Does this mean we can be a real family? He asked Daniel during one of their weekends. We already are a real family, buddy, Daniel explained. Families come in all different shapes. But yeah, maybe the shape of ours is changing a little. Is that okay with you? Yes, Luke cheered. Sophie at school says her parents are divorced, but they're still friends. We can be like that, but better. Kids, Rachel learned, were way more adaptable than adults gave them credit for. 3 months into officially dating, Daniel brought up the future. I'm not rushing anything, he prefaced, but I want you to know what I'm hoping for. Eventually, when we're both ready. Okay, Rachel said nervously. I want us to be a family, Daniel said. A real official family. I want to wake up with you and the kids. I want family dinners every night and movie nights and chaotic mornings fighting over the bathroom. I want it all. That sounds messy, Rachel said with a smile. It sounds perfect, Daniel countered. Rachel thought about her small apartment and Daniel's penthouse. She thought about combining their lives, their spaces, their everything. Not yet, she said. But ask me again in a year. A year? Daniel grinned. I can work with that. And he did work with it. He was patient, present, perfect in his imperfection. They argued sometimes about parenting decisions or schedules or whose turn it was to do pickup.